Welcome to another episode of the Wood Couture Podcast. In today's episode, we have the absolute pleasure to welcome a dear friend, Todd Wynne-Parry. Welcome to the show, Todd.
Thank you, Filippo. Great to be here.
Likewise, it's a pleasure to have you in here, and since we know each other for quite some time. Todd is a veteran in the hospitality industry, more than 30 years experience, instrumental in the development efforts of Marriott, Starwood, IHG in Asia Pacific and Two Roads Hospitality in the USA. Today, Todd is managing director for Horwath, focusing on outdoor hospitality, a great topic that we're going to explore very soon. But first of all, everybody's curious what's happened 30 years ago. Why hospitality?
Well, that's good. That's a good question. I grew up going to a place in Michigan called Mackinac Island, which has this beautiful grand hotel. Many movies were filmed there, and I used to go there as a child and play in the elevator up and down and hang out with the bellman. And I was just fascinated by this great hotel where people came to, vacation and relax. And it was my little domain for a week every summer. And so I really kind of got the bug for travel and for hotels at that point. And then, through school, I went on and worked in hotels. Worked as a porter. I worked in the kitchen in a Chinese restaurant. I worked in behind the bar, and I just always worked in hotels and restaurants. And then when I got out of grad school, I was kind of young out of grad school, and it was the only really vocation I had to bring to the table in an interview. So I got a job, ironically, with Horwath. Then it was called Laventhal and Horwath in San Diego as a consultant to the industry, doing market studies and feasibility studies and helping valuers in the market, mainly in Southern California and Mexico. And then moved to Hong Kong, continuing in that same consulting role, but now doing it all over Asia. And I was kind of guided by I sort of, which everybody should have a higher purpose. And my higher purpose at the time was being the son of a World War II vet. My higher purpose was sort of to keep people traveling around the world so they could understand each other and maybe, not fight each other all the time. So my higher purpose was really to be a part of the tourism industry. And at that time, we were doing a lot of work in the developing countries of Southeast Asia, primarily. And, so I did a lot of tourism work, not just hotel work, but actually for tourism NGOs and things like that. Then had a family, so I needed to start making more money. So I started working with the hotel companies and helping them grow their brands in Asia. And somewhere along the line, a big shift came, which was I really wanted to see more design in the hotels. And so I really got enamored with design hotels, lifestyle hotels, independent hotels, where it wasn't just form, where it wasn't just function. It was actually form too. So it wasn't just a beige carpet, but it was great lobbies and interesting hotel rooms and great bars and restaurants included. And so I got enamored with that and did a W in Sydney. It was the first one outside of the United States, and then came back to the U.S. and continued on with eventually Two Roads Commune Hotels, which became Two Roads Hotels. And then I was like, my higher purpose, I suppose, at that time was to get design into hotels and really help smaller hotels flourish. Because if you're going to go to a hotel, you might as well be an event, and your bedroom in your hotel room might be, where you would aspire your master bedroom at your house to be, or something to that effect. Anyway, I really enjoyed the design aspect of that period, but eventually, again, my higher purpose kind of changed, and there's 7+ billion people on the world, and now there's about 7 billion seats cruising around the world all the time. So I figured everybody's traveling as much as they possibly could right now, or maybe not as much, but the goal of getting people to understand other cultures, I think, is well on its way. So that's kind of over with in terms of my higher purpose. But then it became this. my higher purpose after seeing kids grow up with this and my own self getting, spending too much time on this, the new higher purpose became, how do you get people off of these? And really outdoor hospitality at least makes a strong attempt to get people off the phones and into the woods, or talking with each other around a campfire. And I think that's sort of the next stage of, or the next battleground, if you will, to make it a better world, is to actually talk to one another, not just through text or some other thing. We're all connected, that's for sure. But are we really interpersonally connected? And are we really connected to nature? And things change so much now so quickly. You really can't keep up. And I just feel like when you go outside or you experience the outdoors, you almost have to slow down, right? And I think that's really helpful right now for everybody's mental and physical health. So that's kind of where we are. And when we sold Two Roads Hospitality, I took a break. I wanted to take some time to just be and not do, because I feel like I've been doing since I was about 10 years old and very busy all my life. And so just being for a while was really helpful. And as I thought about being, I really started seeing the inspiration in the independent hotels and the design hotels kind of getting gobbled up by the big companies, which is fine. And that's great. And everybody made a lot of money off those sales of those brands. But I wasn't feeling as much inspiration in those brands as much anymore. But I was seeing a lot of inspiration from the outdoor hospitality area. And this is obviously in the US. I think South Africa with their safaris and the safari tents and having the idea of sitting in a tent with just canvas between you and a big cat or a giraffe or an elephant or something like that. I mean, that is amazing, great, soft adventure. And they're decades ahead of the rest of the world, I think, in that business. So the US is kind of behind, but we're catching up very quickly, and it's a massive market comparatively. So it's moving along. So I decided to kind of turn towards the outdoor hospitality and want to be a part of that.
Yeah, I come back to that because it's a very interesting topic, and together with that, there's another interesting topic of the all-inclusive. That experiential travel and all-inclusive have been neglected for so many years. Suddenly they become top of the list for everybody. Want to redefine the all-inclusive model because apparently there is more margins than breaking it down into room revenue and that. And outdoor hospitality become a must. Even ultra luxury now is purely outdoor. The glamping effect, I would say. But I come on to that. So obviously, you gave away that you started 33 years ago, coincidentally with Loventhal Horwath, in San Francisco. And during these 30 years, has there been somebody that, as you look up to that person, saying that has been my mentor?
Oh, there's been a lot of them, totally, and in different ways. Some that I didn't really agree with on a lot of stuff, but they had really great work ethics or things like that. But there's a guy who's still in Singapore, Eric Levy, who's a very close friend, and he was definitely a mentor from my early days in San Diego when I joined Leventhal and Horwath. And his amazing quality was connecting people. It just seemed like when he's talking to you, he's listening for what's important to you and what you need or what's interesting, and then he knows 3 or 4 people that he can connect you with that will help you with that. And I will never be as good as he is at that, but it certainly inspired me to think that way in dealing with people, particularly in business, trying to make those connections. And really, he was sort of a great indirect networker, if you will. He wasn't always worried about whether he was going to move on or not, or what the connection might do for him. He just wanted to make sure if he had a friend here and a friend here, and they both could work together in some way, then it would benefit. So he was definitely a great mentor in there. And then there's a chap in Australia by the name of Tony South, who I worked with for a while. I think he's with the Australian Tourism Commission now. one of the world's last great gentlemen, you know, posed with a problem or a crisis or an issue of any type. He just had that way of just kind of slowing everything down, breaking it down into the important pieces, and providing just great sage advice or direction that wasn't emotionally based, but fact and always helpful and selfless in his approach. So I miss those great gentlemen that are calm and reassuring and always so polite. So those have been my two big mentors, I think.
I know Eric very well. I must admit, you got a spot on. It is a guy that pam, he put things together in 2 seconds. Fantastic guy. I met him in Hong Kong 5 years ago.
It's also probably one of the best listeners I think I've ever known. And that's his charm. That guy can really listen, which is also a great, I'll never be as good as him at that. That's for sure.
Fantastic. What is your best memory of all these years? Saying that is my glorious moment, or a moment that I do treasure?
Well, the birth of my 3 children, obviously are sort of 1, 2 tied for first, because each one of those events obviously was life-changing, and really, really enjoyed that. And being able to bring them back to the U.S. and experience college or just, life in the U.S. They were born in Hong Kong, Singapore, and Australia. So that was great. Yeah, I mean, there's been so many great memories, but I think that's the best. And then maybe skiing with them. We went fly fishing together at Thanksgiving this year, and these are the big parts of my life. Obviously, they changed them dramatically. Yeah.
Wow, that's a great answer. Love it. I love it. Family is always the on top of everything. No matter who the person is, where they've been, what they've been doing, but it is really in all our DNA. Family is first. It's incredible. That's a beautiful answer.
Yeah, and luckily, about 10 years ago, I met sort of my current partner, and she's amazing. She's got her own business, and we love to travel together, and I've got an old 1953 Airstream, and we take that out for a big trip most of the summer every time, and get out and see different parts of the U.S. And we're empty nesters now, so get to see the kids every once in a while, but got to have each other too. So
very much. I'm very happy for you. And what's your favorite failure? Something you say, what, tough, but I've learned a lot from that.
Well, I'll tell you an incident. I was working on a hotel in Bali. This is in the early 90s in Nusa Dua. And I was trying to get the developer to have it be a Westin hotel. And I was on the plane coming back with a guy named Fred Kleisner, who was then the president of Westin Hotels before it was Starwood. And we're flying back, and he's looking at my pro forma numbers for it, and he just looks at the occupancy and the rate, and I think the occupancy was like 63 or something like that, stabilized, or 65, and the rate was okay. And he says, I don't know why we would want to get involved with a project that's only going to have an occupancy of 63, 65%. Why would we even do that? And I said, well, the thing is that the gross operating profit's like 40%. The labor in Bali is really cheap, so we're going to make a lot of money, and it's going to be successful because you have to look at the profit line. Don't worry about the occupancy. It's going to make a lot of money. And there were some other people around on the plane that heard that. And I got back to my hotel room later in the night, and my immediate boss said, "Hey, you got to call Fred and apologize." And I said, "For what?" And he said, "Well, you took his face away. You really, you made it seem like he was an idiot, right? And that even though you were just telling the truth and answering the question, the way it came off was a little, smart assy." And it's like, oh, okay. So I went to the we were all going to the airport the next day, and I caught up to him when he was alone, and I say, "Hey, Fred, I'm sorry if I came off a little too, blunt in my answer to your question yesterday." And he kind of squared around to me, and he put his hands on my shoulders, and he said, "You know what? Everybody makes mistakes. And sometimes you do a side swipe where you don't even think you did a mistake, but you sideswiped somebody and took their face off, and don't do that." Thank you, sir. That was a good learning moment for me, because I didn't think I was pretty smart.
That's brilliant, Although you didn't do nothing wrong, really. You just told me the truth.
Yeah, well, I think I might have been a little bit frustrated trying to, I didn't understand why this was free money. It was a silver platter. It was, here's the gift, and the guy was not taking the gift, and I was like, why aren't you taking this? Anyway.
If you look back 33 years ago, if it wasn't hospitality, what would have been?
I really wanted to be an entertainment lawyer. I'd seen, I was involved in the entertainment industry as a child, young child on stage quite a bit. And I went to college with a theater scholarship and a pre-law scholarship. So I thought, well, I'll be an entertainment lawyer. But then I talked to some of my friends that had been through law school and what they were doing, and it sounded horribly boring to me. They said they spend hours reviewing contracts and that's all they do, and it sounded horrible. So I went on my track and then became, a developer for these hotel companies, and about half my time was reviewing contracts and reviewing legal work. And I remember thinking, should have been the lawyer.
Love that. It's you all come back to the same place, no matter what profession you take. Brilliant.
Exactly.
So going back to the experiential travel and all-inclusive, and again, everything about experiential travel and the great outdoor, and it seems to be, I'm not going to say the flavor of the month, but almost a need that everybody is seeking to develop these remote places, particularly resort in touch with the nature. And on the other hand, I was in a conference in London last week, and there was a guy in charge of global design for Hyatt, and saying, hey, we bought this big chain in Latin America, in Mexico, of all-inclusive, because we think that is the new way of doing hospitality, and there's great margins. And what is interesting that, as I said before, both these concepts were neglected or not taken seriously for so many years. COVID come, bang, they become a must. Why is that?
Well, I think I'll talk about them each individually, and just quickly. I don't work too much in the all-inclusive area, but I mean the all-inclusive, the evolution of the all-inclusive on a larger scale, anyway. It was always a price point. It was always the consumer looks at it like a cruise. It's only X amount for this many days, and my food and beverage is included. This is a package. I can understand this purchase, and I get these many days, and it's an easy buy. But it is definitely a price point program. And I think in the early days, in the last part of the 20th century, it was really appealing to at least in the Western Hemisphere, that U.S. customer that couldn't believe they could afford to go to a beach location such and such for so little a price. And so I think that was really big. But the big evolution, I believe, has been all inclusive for more domestic markets. So bringing that price point to a point that domestic clientele can do it. It might even be a drive to as opposed to a fly to kind of a destination. So I think it's really evolved. Still a price point sort of element in the bulk, right? There's high end and there's lower end, but I think the bulk, the middle part of it is really, it's a very reasonable and approachable way to get a great destination holiday. So that's that, and I think there's still a big market for that in working on a global sort of mid to upper mid kind of market zone. which is great. I mean, fantastic that the economies of scale of that type of resort can reach a wider and wider market. Everybody needs a vacation. And then the outdoor hospitality part of it, and you mentioned experiential travel, which unfortunately is just kind of a long word. But I remember, 20 years ago doing resorts around Asia, and we used to use those words. It's experiential. You're going to be in this great place and you're going to have this experience, But it was really, to be honest with you, I feel like it was really just lip service. We weren't really designing that, and we weren't having the mentality of when you're going to come to this place and you're going to stay in this accommodation, you're probably not going to be there from 8 a.m. till 7 p.m. You're going to be out. And that wasn't how we designed. We designed that we're going to have 3 different pools. We're going to have a spa. We're going to have 4 restaurants, and we're going to keep you there, and the only experience you're going to have is going from the restaurant to the beach, back to the restaurant. And we're going to keep you there and get your money. But I think where it's evolved to today in terms of outdoor hospitality is kind of the opposite. Is like, no, we're not trying to keep you here at the property the whole time. We want you to go river rafting, go fishing, go hiking, get out into the area that we're in, like in an hour radius or so, and enjoy yourself. When you come back at night, yeah, you can sit by the fire and we'll serve you a meal or whatever it might be. But the idea is really to be away from the resort or the accommodation during the middle part of the day. And one of the things I work with my clients is really two big things that deal with that in relation to design and programming. On the design side, and I just wrote an article about this in Glamping Business Americas, is around events or groups or corporate retreats. These things are going to be even more important than they were before. They were already growing prior to the pandemic, but now with the retreat from office space, office workers need to see each other. They're either not in the office at all, or they're in for 2 or maybe 3 days or something like that. And the complaint is that while they're happy to work at home and they could have that lifestyle, they're not seeing their teammates. They're not getting those interpersonal relationships that they really need. And so having that retreat, not just once a year, but maybe 3 times or 4 times a year is really important. And they want to get outside. Now everybody wants to be outside. So building your destination that accommodates that. So you might have clusters of units, and the unit, it kind of really doesn't matter. It could be a tent, it could be a tree house, it could be a trailer, it could be a tiny house, it could be a cabin. It doesn't really matter, to be honest. What matters is it's horizontal. There aren't internal corridors. And if you have those individual units, then you really want to cluster them so a group can be there, or if you've got on your weekends, there's a lot of families and a lot of romantic couples. Well, maybe separate them. And then creating meeting space, either outdoor amphitheaters, outdoor tented space, or whatever it might be, to allow these events, whether it's weddings, whether it's ad hoc groups, corporate retreats, buyouts, whatever, making sure that you've got the space for that. That's one aspect. And the other aspect is for a really good, lack of a better term, glamping destination, having the experiences be up to 50% of your revenue is really kind of the nirvana. Because if you're bringing somebody there, there's a couple of groups here that do a great job of it. Under Canvas, for one, does a great job of it. They're like, okay, you've booked your 2 nights with us in Moab or wherever. Here's the 8 different things that you can do. Please book your river rafting, book your, sunrise hike, book your, guided tour, OHV, off-road tour. And they do a really good job of doing that. So you get their revenue bump going up, and because they're taking a piece of every bit of these things, because they are the conduit. They're the people are coming to that destination and they're feeding them to the operators, or they're operating the thing themselves. So I think in terms of outdoor hospitality, those are 2 big themes I would say that continue moving forward.
It was interesting, in one of your interviews, I was reading on the net that you say it's not only about location, but it's also site. So you have a kind of a double challenge. It's not only finding the right location. So why is that?
Well, 2 things around that. One is technology and how we live our lives is changing so dramatically. I used to say around city properties, it was no longer location. It was actually location Uber when that technology came out, right? And so that made it so that your hotel didn't have to be within a block and a half of all the eateries and everything like that. You could start to put hotels in different parts of the town because you could safely jump out, grab an Uber, and be there in 5 or 10 minutes. And it really changed how we looked at sites and whether they would work or not. And you're seeing that happen. I'm not sure if it's so much out of the world, but certainly in the U.S. If you got a really cool hotel and it hits all the buttons, but it doesn't happen to be right in the CBD, it's okay. Just jump into Uber and you're there. So that changed things a little bit. And in the outdoor world, the location, meaning, okay, you're near a national park, or you're near a beach or a wine country or a Gulf region or whatever it might be, that's great. But if you're really trying to create that back to nature kind of feeling, you're wanting that moment around a campfire or getting up in the morning and hearing the birds chirp and just experiencing nature, if that's your goal, then putting the site next to the I-70 interstate, with trucks going by all the time, you're not going to achieve what you're trying to do, because things that are not of nature you're going to be hearing it and feeling it and smelling it. And smelling is a problem too. Sometimes you got a dump somewhere near your site. I looked at one of those in Texas. There's literally a refuse dump 100 yards from where people want to put a glamping site. I'm like, this is not good. The wind blows the wrong way. It's not pleasant. And so that's kind of what I meant by that, is you really have to look deeply at the site. And also the other issue around the site is, depending on what type of structure you're using for your accommodation, the topography is going to make a big difference. Not having level land is difficult when you're trying to do a horizontal development. So hillsides are beautiful, but they're expensive to build on. And when you start cutting into them, it starts looking ugly. And so that's kind of what I meant by that.
Do you have segmentation in the outdoor hospitality, meaning the 5-star, the 3-star? What is the structure? How do you approach each project?
Sure. I'll do segmentation both in the pricing and then also in the demand segments. So the pricing, definitely. Like any market, in the hotel market, you kind of have a pyramid where there's only so many 5-star properties or luxury properties, and there's a little bit more of the upper luxury, let's say, or upper middle tier or whatever, and then a lot down at the bottom. And that's definitely still, at least in the U.S., and it's still exactly that way. The upper tier of the outdoor hospitality in the U.S. anyway, there's great product, ultra luxury, like you've had Luca Franco on here a few times, and his big one here is Camp Sarika at the Amangiri, and those are $4,000 a night. The resort at Paws Up in Montana is going to be $2,000 a night for a tent, 4-night minimum. So those are pretty expensive, and they are a little bit all-inclusive, but not really. You got to actually pay for all the extra experiences typically. So you're spending a lot of money at those places. And then you got the next sort of rung down, which would, includes places like collective retreats at the high end, which are going to be, $600 to $800 a night, but you're going to have a Michelin star chef, and you're going to have an amazing food and beverage experience. And you're going to be really cool places. Governor's Island in New York, and the Hill Country in Texas, and Vail. And then there's Auto Camp, where you're in an interesting Airstream, and in a great place as well. And those are going to be, $300 a night to $400 a night, depending on the time in the season. And Under Canvas, which is going to be a little less, kind of that $250 to $350 kind of range, depending again on seasonality. And then at the lower level, you have, in the US anyway, which is very unique. Let me say the U.S. is really a drive market for the most part, and because of that, you've got 15,000 RV parks around the country, and some of them are amazing, just gorgeous, stunning RV parks. And you have to have an $800,000 RV to get it to pull in even, and it can't be more than 10 years old, and they're really amazing. And then you have then scads of just random ones everywhere. So that's kind of the pyramid. It's still that way. From a market segmentation perspective, you definitely have it's primarily a leisure product. So the majority of your business is going to be free individual travelers, FITs are going to take a bulk, and heavily weekend and high season based. But then you're going to have groups as well, groups and events, and those are ones that are just happening in the area, or you develop your own event yourself. And so those are the two kind of the big, and then the groups I would say between ad hoc weddings and birthdays, and then you've got corporate events, which are growing, as I mentioned before. So that's kind of the segmentation right now.
One of the biggest, actually, the major cause of delays for hotel opening is the FF&E, and is it the same in the outdoor hospitality world?
So the issue, the big issues holding up development in the outdoor hospitality right now is really ends up being entitlement. There's a couple of inhibitors, but doing these projects in remote locations, you're always going to have it's a sensitive natural environment. It's a sensitive local community. So they're going to have issues with where's the workforce housing. If there isn't workforce housing that you're not providing, then how are they going to get here? And that's going to add traffic, and we've already got a traffic issue. So getting properties entitled for what they want to do, there's a lot of resistance. Right, there was resistance before the pandemic. Now, because everybody's going outside and going to these places, it's even I suppose worse. Another aspect is the lending on it. Lending in the sector has been difficult. The big institutional banks are concerned about the product that you have. Is it real property or is it personal property? In the case of a trailer or something on wheels, that's personal property. It can drive away. And so the big banks are concerned about that, or they just won't lend on that aspect of the development. The other issue in a lot of places that are remote right now, particularly in the west side of the US, is the fires, and so insurance on the fires. So those are a couple of big inhibitors. The other thing is that every project is completely unique. Even if you've got a brand and you've got a cookie cutter, they're all quite unique in the location. And so your FF&E, it ends up being a little bit unique every time. So it's hard. I think it's hard to get into a pattern of purchases that will speed up that process. But certainly in the last year and a half, the supply chain has been very difficult. 2 years ago, the issue was the tariffs on Chinese made products coming in, and so that pushed people to Vietnam and Indonesia for FF&E. But now it's just been the backlog of trying to get product into the country, and then if it's being built here or in Mexico or in Canada or in the US, it's not so much the supply chain of getting it to you, but actually having the employees over the last year and a half actually at work to make the stuff. So it's not been easy. I'll say that, but the bigger issue has been the entitlement. So if you've got a lead of a year and a half or so just on your entitlement to know you're sure, then hopefully during that time you're working on design and you're working on hopefully pre-ordering some of that stuff, or at least when you're going to order, and maybe it doesn't slow down as much at that time. But it's been an issue for sure.
Is sustainability a given in outdoor hospitality or still a challenge to be addressed?
I advise my clients when they're putting together a brand sort of pillars and what's the brand all about. Again, I think having a higher purpose in what you're doing is all very important, and particularly for brands. I mean, what are you really doing? why do you come to work every day? How are you really enriching people's lives, or are you, enriching a community's, situation or whatever? I think that it's always important to have, some level of sustainability or giving back as one of your brand pillars, and having a program around that. And that's for sure. You should, because that's the whole point. You're trying to get people out of nature so they can appreciate it, appreciate their interpersonal relationships, but also appreciate their relationship with this big blue marble spinning in the cosmos. But the problem is because each property is typically remote. You have power and water and sewage, and you always have to deal with those three things. And so my belief is that we won't be having this conversation in 10 years, because we will have figured out how to get the power to these places. And I don't know whether it's solar or wind or, nuclear or hydrogen or something. We're going to figure out a way to have people be off grid and not stress the grid. We're not there yet. And so we always end up with this balancing act of, okay, we want to build, 85 glamping units or whatever, or tents or whatever it is. And we're going to have 160 people on property. We know how much sewage capacity we need. We know how much water we need. We know how much power we need. Now let's look at the alternatives of how we can provide that. And if we can get to a sustainable approach, then great. Typically, water tends to be, you can usually drill a well, and we don't have as much problem with water. Sewage, if either is one a line we can pick up, or we can do a septic system somewhere that's got a great rating, and it really, it's okay. That's going to get better and better, and it's not actually that expensive in the scheme of things. The power is a tough one. The solar is just not there, and you need to have a certain amount of power when people are out there for your fire and life safety issues, just to begin with. You might need lighting, you might need something to power something that's going to keep people alive. And so having a system that's off grid, and none are perfect, but having one that at least covers some of your needs, but also has a backup in case there's a problem. I think those things are really important. Yeah. So it's an issue now. Hopefully it'll be better.
Interesting. And given the way things are going right now, if I give you a crystal ball, where do you see the hospitality trends aging towards in the next 3 to 5 years?
3 to 5 years. Well, one of the interesting things, having been involved with the independent and boutique lifestyle brand as much as I was, I remember. So we did the W in Sydney, and in 1999, and it opened right before the Olympics in Sydney in 2000. I remember being at a conference. It might have been Alice or NYU, a hotel conference in 2014. And the panel was on lifestyle and boutique hotels. And the first 20 minutes of the panel was the moderator trying to get everybody to define what lifestyle and boutique hotels were. This is 14 years after the first W was done. And probably 20 years since, 30 years since there'd been boutique hotels in San Francisco with Chip Conley, what he was doing, and Adrian Blaz in New York. I mean, people were doing these things, decades before this silly panel on what it was. And I feel like the outdoor hospitality industry will evolve much faster than that, and that we won't be sitting here 14 years from now on a panel trying to define what outdoor hospitality is. It's ridiculous. So I think it'll evolve much quicker than that, and I'd love to be part of that. And because when it evolves quicker than the institutional money and investors, which are already in there now, they'll flood into it at a bigger level, and I think we'll get better product at each price point, and we'll really make getting into the outdoors much more approachable. And that's kind of the goal for everybody that's, doing that mid to higher mid-market kind of product, is really to make the outdoors approachable. People that are in a urban environment, but they don't want to go put a tent up, and they don't want to pull a trailer or whatever, but they want to go outdoors. And that's what, outdoor hospitality is really, I think, the main sort of thrust is to make the outdoors more approachable for people who are a little anxious about bugs and animals and dirt. And so I think the more money that comes into it, the more really good product and brands and things will be out there over the next 3 to 5 years. And then just like with the case of the independent boutique hotels, there'll be a consolidation. The big hotel companies will go, wow, this is really an interesting business, and our clients really want this. So they'll start buying up the brands that have been established. That's my crystal ball. And that'll be definitely in 3 to 5 years. You'll see the Hyatts and the Marriotts and the Accors going, wow, that's a really cool sector. We should be in there. Let's do it. And so that will happen. I'm almost positive.
So clearly your bet is on the outdoor hospitality and consolidation. In the context of the outdoor hospitality, is there a place in the US where no one is thinking of doing an outdoor product? And in your opinion, that is going to be the future actually of outdoor hospitality. Where that site will it be?
Where no one's thinking about it right now?
Yeah. Like, would you see outdoor hospitality on the Strip in Las Vegas? I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but, never say goal.
Yeah. There's already been some attempts at it on rooftops. There's a couple around the world where people have craned up, an old trailer to the top of a rooftop and kind of created a garden up there and created an outdoor space on a rooftop. In an urban environment, I could see that happening. There's no reason why I couldn't. It's got all the infrastructure it needs. And you've got, the outdoors right above you and the mayhem of the city down below you. The interesting thing is that, like in the case of Vegas, I mean, you can go 10, 15 minutes outside of the city and you can get into the desert and have that experience. And that's been going on for ages, but it's a little, it's not quite as glamorous as the Strip, obviously, or whatever. And it's not as gorgeous as being in Yosemite or Yellowstone or Glacier or something like that. The interesting thing is that, the U.S. is such a huge market, and there's so many cities that can support this type of product. What you're seeing, which I love, is really amazing product coming out of the Plain States, or as my coastal snobby friends would say, the flyover states, right? So those states in Missouri and South Dakota, which are really kind of, you just think of these flat, plain, nothing. But the people that are in those towns, those cities around there, they go to New York, they go to the Catskills, they go to Florida, they go to Yosemite, they go to the Olympic National Park. They go to these places and they see where these really cool glamping experiences are, and they want it there, and they know there's a demand for it. So you're seeing that part of the world, kind of catch up. The other thing, getting back to the technology advancement issue, is there's like there's Airbnb and there's VRBO and there's all that. Well, there's also HipCamp, DIRT, DYRT, recreation.gov, Go RV, Go Camp. I mean, there's a ton of online travel agencies that deal just with being outside. HipCamp, for example, I think they got 20,000 something different sites around the U.S. right now. Literally, if you have, and I stay at them quite a bit. I just drove from Oregon over to Colorado for a glamping conference back in October, and I stayed at HipCamps all the way there and all the way back. And some of them were just a guy with a farm with 100 acres of alfalfa out the back, but he had a beautiful farmhouse with a lawn, and he had 3 sites there, and you just pull up in your trailer on his lawn and pay him $40, $20, whatever that might be, and and sleep and hang out and then take off the next morning. So that ability for people to monetize literally their backyards through camping.
Well, lot of food for thoughts, and we will watch it back one day and say, Todd, you are absolutely right. That would be an amazing and exclusive podcast.
Yeah, well, and this work and kind of a lot of things I've been talking about have been what's going on in the U.S. because it's evolving and growing so quickly, but it's really global. There's I'm working on some projects in Costa Rica right now and in St. Bart's, like you are as well. Getting back to the sustainability thing, in a lot of these amazing places around the globe, there's a lot of environmental restrictions, right? It doesn't matter whether it's Europe or Africa or Asia. People have figured out that they don't want a lot of, bricks and mortar and a lot of heavy lift onto their environment. So a great way to get people to a place and have a very light footprint on the land and in the local community is to doing an outdoor hospitality suggestion. It's not always less expensive. Let me tell you that. It's not always less expensive, but because it can be very expensive. But at least at the end of the day, you're not adding a lot of concrete. You're not adding to the carbon footprint. Hopefully, in that market, you're actually either leaving it neutral or doing better, and hopefully your positive impact on the local community, whether it's employment or purchasing that great roasted coffee down the road or that from that little bakery. And that really doesn't matter. That doesn't really matter where you are in the world. You can have that effect and bring in that great export of tourism with a very light load on the land. So I think it's not, it's definitely not just a U.S. thing. We're just figuring it out. We're just, it's just growing here. But it's really a global phenomenon. I think it dovetails with what we're seeing in places like Bali and like Phuket and places that just got out of hand. Too much tourism, and I think that's a bad thing. Unfortunately, I mean, I love people getting around and stuff like that, but taking a sensitive area of the world that's beautiful and everybody should see and just overdoing it, that's tough.
Like every end of each episode, we ask you the famous question: if we put a massive white canvas on the top of the Empire State Building, what message would you write on that?
I didn't know that was the question.
I'm glad I caught you. It's very difficult to get somebody with your experience to think, I'm glad I caught you for once.
So it's on the top of the Empire State Building.
Yeah, massive white canvas. You can be seen from Miami all the way to, on the top of Canada.
Yeah. I'd say go to the woods.
I love that. I love that. That's amazing. It's amazing.
I mean, you can say get outside. You can get outside, but I don't feel like that. I think that means somebody just maybe steps outside their door. I think go to the woods, just go out and get in the trees and let them talk to you a little bit. Maybe.